What if you did not arrive in this world as an empty vessel? What if the moment you were born, before language, before education, before the system got hold of you, you already carried something extraordinary inside you? Not potential, not possibility, knowledge, a deep encoded understanding of reality that modern science is only now beginning to document, and that ancient traditions protected for thousands of years as their most sacred secret. The official story is simple. You are born blank. The world writes on you. Everything you become is a product of what you are taught, what you experience, what the environment around you shapes you into. But that story has a problem. It does not match the evidence. Today, we go into what the evidence actually shows, from the cutting edge of neuroscience and quantum biology to the oldest mystery schools on Earth, about what consciousness actually is, where it comes from, and what you brought with you into this life that the system spent centuries trying to make you forget. Let's go deeper. The idea that you are born as a blank slate, what philosophers call the tabula rasa, is one of the most consequential ideas in the history of Western thought. John Locke proposed it in the 17th century. The mind at birth is empty. Experience writes everything onto it. There is nothing prior, nothing innate, nothing brought in from elsewhere. This idea did not just become a philosophical position. It became the foundation of the entire modern educational and social engineering project. If the mind arrives empty, then whoever controls what goes into it controls everything. The institution becomes the author of the person. The state becomes the architect of the citizen. The blank slate theory gave the system total authority over human development, and it was wrong. Not partially wrong, fundamentally wrong. And the evidence against it has been accumulating for decades from multiple independent fields of research that the mainstream has been remarkably slow to integrate. The first crack appeared in genetics, the discovery that human beings are born with innate capacities for language, for facial recognition, for mathematical intuition, for moral reasoning, that cannot be explained by experience alone. Noam Chomsky's work on universal grammar demonstrated that children acquire language with a speed and precision that is impossible if they are starting from zero. Something in the architecture of the human mind arrives pre-structured for language, pre-knowing, in a very specific sense. But this was only the beginning. Let's go deeper. In the 1990s, researchers at the University of Arizona began documenting something that the mainstream scientific community found deeply uncomfortable. Children between the ages of 2 and 5, before they could have been exposed to the relevant information through normal experience, were spontaneously recalling detailed, verifiable memories of lives they had not lived. Names, places, specific events, family members of people they had never met. In case after case, the details were verified. The children knew things they could not possibly know if consciousness began at birth. Dr. Ian Stevenson spent 40 years at the University of Virginia, documenting over 3,000 of these cases. His methodology was rigorous. His conclusions were conservative. But his data pointed in one direction. Consciousness carries information across the boundary of physical birth. This was not the fringe. This was peer-reviewed research published in mainstream academic journals, conducted by a professor of psychiatry at one of the most respected universities in the world. It was ignored, not refuted. Ignored. Because the implications were incompatible with the blank slate model that the entire social engineering project depended on. Meanwhile, in quantum biology, a parallel discovery was unfolding. The emerging field of epigenetics, pioneered by researchers like Dr. Bruce Lipton, demonstrated that the information encoded in DNA was not fixed, that experiences, memories, and even emotional states could be chemically marked on the genome and passed to subsequent generations. Your grandparents' traumas live in your body, their knowledge, their fears, their adaptations, encoded not in stories, but in biology. You did not arrive empty. You arrived carrying the accumulated experience of every ancestor who came before you. Let's go deeper. Here is what makes this extraordinary. While modern science has been slowly, reluctantly arriving at these conclusions through empirical research, the ancient world encoded them as foundational knowledge thousands of years ago. Plato, one of the most sophisticated philosophical minds of the ancient world, built his entire theory of knowledge around a single radical premise. He called it anamnesis, recollection, the idea that genuine knowledge is not learned from the external world. It is remembered from within. The soul, in Plato's understanding, existed before birth and carried with it a complete understanding of the eternal forms, the deep patterns underlying all of reality. The process of education, properly understood, was not the installation of new information. It was the systematic removal of the forgetting that birth had induced. Learning was remembering. The Vedic tradition of ancient India encoded the same understanding in the concept of Akasha, the cosmic field in which all knowledge, all experience, all consciousness that has ever existed is permanently recorded. The individual soul in the Vedic framework does not begin at birth. It arrives from the Akasha, carrying within it the accumulated wisdom of its entire journey through existence. The ancient Egyptians described the soul's journey through multiple lives as a process of progressive awakening, each incarnation adding to a store of inner knowledge that persisted across the boundary of death and rebirth. The mystery school initiations were specifically designed to trigger the recollection of this accumulated inner knowing, to collapse the forgetting that ordinary life induced and allow the initiate direct access to what they already, at the deepest level, knew. The Gnostics, whose understanding we explored in a previous video, described the divine spark within each person as carrying the memory of its origin in the pleroma, the fullness of the divine. The spiritual path was not acquisition, it was recognition, remembering what had been forgotten at the moment of descent into matter. Every serious ancient tradition agreed on this. You did not arrive empty. You arrived full and were systematically taught to forget it. Let's go deeper. So if this knowledge is real, if consciousness arrives with encoded wisdom, if the soul carries accumulated understanding across the boundary of birth, why has the dominant culture spent centuries insisting the opposite? Because a person who knows they arrived full cannot be convinced they are empty. And a person who cannot be convinced they are empty cannot be filled by the institution. The blank slate theory was not just a philosophical mistake. It was a political necessity, because the moment you accept that you arrived knowing that somewhere beneath the layers of conditioning and forgetting, there is a deep inner knowing that does not depend on external authority for its validity, the entire architecture of institutional control begins to lose its grip. You stop needing the school to tell you what is true. You stop needing the media to tell you what reality is. You stop needing the system to tell you who you are. And a population that does not need these things is a population that is extraordinarily difficult to manage. This is why the suppression of inner knowing has been so consistent across so many different institutions and time periods. The Catholic Church declared direct inner knowledge heresy. The Enlightenment replaced it with empirical materialism. Modern psychology pathologized it as delusion. The education system ignored it entirely. Each institution used different language, but the function was identical. Keep the window closed. Keep the forgetting in place. Keep you convinced that you arrived with nothing, so that you remain dependent on the system for everything. Let's go deeper. So if you arrived knowing, if the forgetting was induced rather than natural, then the question becomes, how do you remember? Because this is not abstract. This is the most practical question a human being can ask. The first answer the ancient traditions gave was stillness. The inner knowing does not shout. It does not compete with the noise of the conditioned mind. It speaks in the register that only becomes audible when the surface noise subsides. Every tradition we have discussed, Platonic, Vedic, Gnostic, Egyptian, place the practice of interior silence at the absolute center of the path, not as a preparation for the real work, as the real work itself. The second answer was attention to what you already know before you think about it. There is a category of knowing that arrives before reasoning. The immediate recognition, the gut sense, the sudden clarity that precedes and often contradicts the logical mind's conclusions. The ancient traditions called this direct perception. Modern neuroscience calls it implicit knowledge. Whatever name you give it, it is the signal of the deeper knowing breaking through. Learning to notice it, trust it, and act on it is the practice of remembering. The third answer was the most radical. Question everything you were told you do not know. The forgetting was installed through teaching, through the systematic insistence that you arrived empty, that authority lives outside you, that the inner life is unreliable. Reversing it requires the deliberate, sustained practice of treating your own inner experience as a valid and primary source of knowing, not to the exclusion of external knowledge, but as its equal, as something that does not require institutional permission to be real. You were not born blank, you were born knowing, and what was installed over that knowing, layer by layer, year by year, institution by institution, was never the truth of you. It was the forgetting of it. Here is what I want you to carry from this. The system that educated you needed you to believe you arrived empty, because empty vessels need to be filled, and whoever does the filling holds the power. But the evidence from quantum biology, from consciousness research, from 3,000 verified cases of children remembering what they should not be able to remember, from every serious ancient tradition on Earth, points in a different direction. You arrived with something encoded in your biology, carried in your consciousness, woven into the deepest architecture of who you are. A knowing that predates language, predates education, predates every institution that has ever claimed authority over what you are allowed to know. The forgetting was real. The conditioning was thorough. The institutions were effective, but they could not erase what was written before they got to you. It is still there, beneath the programming, beneath the conditioning, beneath every layer of forgetting that was carefully placed between you and what you already know. You do not need to learn it, you need to remember it. If this reached something in you, if something in you recognized what we uncovered today, leave a comment below. Tell us what you think you knew before the world told you to forget it. We read every one. We will see you in the next one.